Adam Bowler, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Adam Bowler, nice to meet you.
Nice to
Karen
meet you.
Mann, we're here representing Home Security Group.
Great, and we're here representing John Richards, who's the Director of Security at Saskatchewan Arena, and we're so pleased to be meeting with you today.
Great.
Yes, thank you for taking the time. I think, one of the big things that we'd like to address right off the bat is was already kind of a breakdown in conversations to date between both of our clients. And so wanted to make sure we were all starting from the same page. Say one of the big things for our client to really feel reassured throughout these negotiations and hopefully building a longer term relationship with your client is that your client is willing to trust our client to do what it is that they are the experts at. One of the things that our client was very excited about at the outset of conversations was the opportunity to put the Home Security Group name on Saskatchewan Arena and bring with that the credibility and really the knowledge and expertise, particularly given the current landscape of threats to arenas and some of the tragic events that have taken place. But again, what's paramount to our client is knowing that your client trusts her to do that.
And we really appreciate you saying all of that. We as well wanted to acknowledge it's regretful how the last meeting between our clients ended. And notwithstanding those previous relations, our client has expressed that he does view your company as the top security company in the field. You are industry leaders. As you know, what we're experiencing right now is somewhat of a PR nightmare. So our client has an executive team that knows that our security system is out of date, and now due to the YouTube video, it has been disclosed to the public that our security system is an embarrassment. All fingers are pointing to our client right now, but the executive simply is not giving us a budget to implement all of the security features addressed by your client. And this is the very definition of being caught between a rock and a hard place, and that's the position our client is in right now. Of course, we need to hire a firm to do the security upgrades, and we really want that to be a collaboration with your company, or your client's company.
So what we'd like to do, just being upfront, there are some items here that our client has said are hard line items to get the arena up to the minimum security standard that our client feels comfortable signing off and allowing your client to continue to operate at. With that being said, you can definitely appreciate that there are some operational barriers when it comes to funding. So we'd love to kind of walk through the original proposal, talk about some of those hardline items, and then where we can get creative if that works.
I would love to do that. Just quickly, I want to address what Tansy has written on the board here. So we really want to come to a solution today that satisfies all the parties that are involved in this negotiation. Of course, there's your client, there's our client and the executive that he's dealing with, but also, very importantly, is the public. The security is a huge problem we need to address, and we want to come to a solution that satisfies all parties. So if you'd like to speak more to what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think the thing we want to make sure, and I'll pass it off to Adam to talk about the actual security measures, but our client's committed not just to having something that's going to help address the PR issue, which again, we can appreciate it's a sticky situation to be in right now, but that we're actually addressing the underlying security concerns.
Absolutely.
Appreciating you might be able to get some solutions from another firm that's going to get you over this bridge, but we're not here to slap a Band-Aid on it. We want to make sure that your customers are really safe when they're attending your client's arena.
And that's what our client wants as well.
Pardon me, and really just building on that point, we're not interested in giving you some type of off-the-shelf solution to try to solve the public and something like that. We really want to tailor what we can do for your client in the way that we present alternatives and the way that we really structure this agreement. We're really interested in making sure that this is a long-term relationship. Security is such an important part of really any business, but especially now topically is the arenas and concert venues of that like. So we really want to have like a very frank discussion around what your perspectives are on security and where you think you can improve and how we think we can help you achieve those goals.
Great.
Absolutely. And you had mentioned that there were some hard line items based off of the previous agreement. So, and I know you mentioned that you were going to go through that agreement. And I would appreciate hearing what those things are. I would just be curious to know if, when you say a hard line, are these things that your client is suggesting that she will not be able to budge on from the beginning, or are you just sort of outlining what we have agreed to previously?
So I think it kind of comes back to security measures. There's some security measures that really just can't be trifled with, right? We can't make adjustments to some of the basics that, to get you to a level where your clients' customers are safe and where the public at large feels safe in attending Saskatoon Arena. So that's really what we mean by things that maybe aren't as negotiable. It's things that you shouldn't really be interested, in our opinion, from changing anyways.
And I think what'll help us, as now that we're touching on constraints, you can walk us through a little bit more about what some of the budgetary realities are, because that'll help us understand kind of your client's perspective.
So our client has come forward to your client with a $500,000 strict budget for the security features this year, and he has not expressed any ability to go beyond that number for the current year.
So as I understand it, and sorry to cut you off, I understand that he put forward a $500,000 budget, but this is a part of the overall security budget of $2 million. So maybe can you walk us through what comprises that $2 million budget? What really makes up security? How do you approach security from a budgetary perspective?
Right, and that's absolutely a fair question, and it's an answer that I wish we would be able to provide for you today. Our client hasn't let us know the full broad scope of his budget, what he allocates to each security measure. We just know for the security upgrades, he has $500,000 this year to work with. And this just goes back to the sort of rock and a hard place that our client is in, because he appreciates that he wants to he needs to implement these security features for the public and for the sake of appeasing the executive. But also he's working within such a tight such a tight budget. So this is sort of the difficult position that he's in. But we would be willing to discuss sort of beyond just a one-year relationship. We have $500,000 to work with this year.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I think we really need to try to think outside of the box here and try to come up with some solutions. We really are interested in all the updates that you've proposed, but of course we're constrained by the budget that we've proposed. So knowing that our client cannot achieve the budget that your client had put forward, we really know, we're just interested in knowing why you're interested in collaborating with us, what brought you back to the table today, knowing our budgetary constraints.
Well, I think one of the realities of the last conversation was seeing what core security measures were in place, which I think we can all agree at. Receiving the call, it wasn't that our client did not want to work on this project, but we've been invited back to the table, and one of the things that our client has expressed to us is that she does feel that she was not taken seriously for the credibility that the firm brings and the standard that the home security group stands for.
Yeah.
So I will say that willing to have the discussion, but not willing to, to promise that we can be flexible in all areas, because
Right.
again, it's really that minimum standard of security
Right.
to ensure that they continue to operate, and then we can absolutely discuss longer term as well. I think what would be helpful, knowing that the YouTube issue is very, fresh off the presses, is understanding if anything has changed since
Right.
that last discussion. Have there been any changes, or what is it that was implemented by your client following the recent PR?
So I believe it has been a very short timeline since the PR incident, and this has been sort of our client's first step since that incident. Our client recognizes that your client is the leader in security, and our client has stressed to us that he wants to work with you, and
Right.
he wants to find a way to fit that into the budgetary constraints that he is in.
Great. And thank you. It's just important for us to understand if the situation has changed again from a security perspective, that we just want to make sure that we can work off of the quote that we had sent to you, that nothing major has changed. So with that, and I want to touch on what you said about finding some opportunities across multiple years, but really about this long-term relationship.
Sure.
I think it would be helpful that we maybe just start to go through some of the components of the quote that we had provided to you guys.
Sure.
So that we can start talking through some of the points, unless if you have anything else that you'd like to
No,
discuss.
absolutely. I think that's a good place to start. So
Okay.
we're all on the same page here.
Right. So I think probably the most logical place to start is with what we like to call kind of the backbone of a security system, and that's your security guards.
Okay.
So with that, I'd just like to understand a few things about the way that you currently manage your security guards that we can understand and maybe provide some solutions for you. Can you tell us about your current hiring practices around your security guards, what you're currently looking for them to do in the scope of their regular duties.
Okay, so again, that's information that our client hasn't shared with us in detail. What we do know, though, is that our client does value his staff, and actually, in the past 3.5 years, he hasn't been able to give them a raise, which is another reason why we're under such tight budgetary constraints, is because he recognizes the value that his staff brings to the company, and he just wants to show their appreciation to them. So we do know that Saskatoon Arena does have a positive relationship with the staff, but we don't know the specific nature of the training process and the hiring process.
In terms of the security guards particularly, so Tansy speaking to our security staff generally, but in terms of our security guards, we do they do come from a third party that we contract with.
Okay, can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that contract?
Yes, if you just give me one moment here.
Absolutely.
So just give me one moment. So yes, as I mentioned, we do use a staffing agency. So that is the third party does bear the cost of managing and paying for the security guards, and we pay the staffing agency an annual fee to maintain this relationship.
Okay.
And what is that current fee?
The current fee, in full disclosure, is $275,000 a year.
Okay, so I think this really presents us with an opportunity. Like we said, we really want to help you find solutions. One of the components of home security is that we also offer a similar service to your client. So we had initially quoted, we could offer a similar service to your client. We had initially quoted on strictly training programs, but I think we could really look at taking over training as well as providing staffing, if that's something that you would be interested in.
Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think one of the transparently biggest gaps that we found in your client security system was the security guards. Home security groups talks about its security guards as the front line of your security system, both for their training, professionalism, and not only what they're able to do for your client in terms of security, but in the peace of mind they're able to give to the clients who are coming to the arena. Security is important not only in perception, but also in the difference between something that could have been avoiding a catastrophic event and dealing with the aftermath, and we want to make sure we're avoiding those situations. In some of Home's early assessments of the arena, there were a few incidents where our client staffers were able to sneak through security, were able to bring in banned items into the arena. The recent YouTube PR is also related to getting past the security that you had on site. And so it's one of the not only most critical pieces of a security system, but also one of the biggest vulnerabilities that Saskatoon Arena has right now. Home security guards are trained in the home security method. They stand to the same protocols and quality standards that Home Security Group itself stands for. And so what we'd be looking to do is to provide a similar service that you're currently getting from a third party under the home security package, and that would be integrated with the other security measures we could put into place.
How much would your clients be charging for that fee?
So, and I think this is really where the opportunity exists for your client. If you were to continue with the training program, we would be able to lump the training program in with providing staffing overall for a fee of $275,000 per year. So it would be a savings of $100,000 per year to your client from their annual budget.
So, and how would that tie into the ongoing consulting that you had initially proposed in your security upgrade?
So I think would like to circle back to the ongoing consulting, and the reason we say that is one of the things that our client expressed is depending on what the other minimum measures we can put in place are, the stronger the system or our client feels the system is, then there is potential to actually alleviate some of the need for such regular checks. Hesitant to say that so early in the conversation because again, that would be dependent on what actually gets put into place.
Okay, and how soon would if we did decide to go this route and end the contract prematurely with our current company that we get the security guards from, how soon, in theory, would home security guards be able to come in?
So one of the benefits of being a leader in the industry is that we find that we have security guards that want to work with us, and we have a highly trained staff. So we could react relatively quickly, almost immediately, to provide security guards to your client, provided you'd actually have to terminate the other contract, but we would have no problem starting right away, and we would be willing to prorate that $275,000 per year if we were looking
The
to do
remainder
that.
of whatever
Yeah.
your current fiscal year would be, which I believe is 2 months.
It is 2 months, and then if we were just, again, if we decide to go this route and sign a 1-year contract for the security, you're saying you'd prorate the 275 to cover the 14-month period?
No, so what I'm saying is, apologies if I confused you, is we would start, to make it easier for a budgeting perspective, we would sign the 275 for 1 year,
Oh,
starting
I
at the
see.
beginning of your
Okay.
next fiscal, and then we could prorate for the next 2 months
see,
to
okay.
kind of take you to the end of the year.
The company needs to do something meaningful quickly, particularly now that it's exposed to the public and you're getting so much pressure from your executives. Again, any measure that addresses security but leaves out the security guard portion is going to still leave a huge gap, which again doesn't really meet those minimum standards, which is why we wanted to address security guards first. If there is a cycle that you're not able to terminate your existing contract, appreciating there's something in place, we'd at the very least look for training of your existing guards, but it just seems, during such a short period, and then you're gonna replace them, wanna make sure you're also not just wasting cost up front.
Yeah, and I think we've gone over the benefits of having a home security force in, so.
Yeah, so we recognize that this is a great opportunity for both of our clients. This could be potentially a very lucrative opportunity for your client. This isn't just a one-time security upgrade and you're out. We're looking at an annual $275,000 a year, and that's such a great opportunity for both of us to just develop a really strong ongoing relationship. And it also looks great on your company if you're able to come in. This is a great public relationship opportunity for your client. You're coming in, you're going to be recognized as a company that saved our client essentially from this PR nightmare that they're in right now. So having said that,
Sorry, I wanna make sure
Yeah,
we're on
and-
the same page there.
Yeah, and we understand that it's a great opportunity, but it does come with some amount of risk to our client. You've naturally, as you've touched on, you're coming into a bit of a PR disaster, and we're happy to help your clients kind of quell some of those PR concerns. We're looking forward to taking on the challenge of fixing some of these security deficiencies.
Yeah, but one of the things that our client has expressed is that there is a lot of PR risk, and that's why we want to make sure we're at least getting to these minimum standards.
Yeah.
Normally, our client takes the position that once a proposal is set out, that is what's required to feel comfortable. In this case, willing to work with your client, knowing that there is some very real exposure, and that obviously in our position that you want to move something quickly, want to start building that relationship. But again, I think just want to make clear our client's position that this does actually currently carry a fair amount of risk. Our client actually wants to attach their name as a show of good faith that this is a long-term relationship. But there is, and again, I more want to make sure we're on the same page because our client does have actually some concerns around that.
So we would love to just maybe understand a little bit more what you mean by risk. How is this bringing your client risk? And maybe that's something that we might be able to address in alternative ways.
Yeah, so I think from an overall risk standpoint, as we kind of touched on, we're coming into a new location that's very much in the spotlight of how security is handled. We're confident that we can rise to the occasion and fix some of the deficiencies that you guys have been experiencing. Well, the point that we just want to make is that we need to make sure that we get it up to a level that we're comfortable with from minimum security standards, since we are willing to put our name on the project and to announce even that we're going to be taking over security from the Saskatoon Arena.
So sorry, just to sort of understand where the risk is coming in, are you concerned that our client, how can our client make your client feel comfortable in taking this step with our client?
So it's less around the concern of taking the step. It's more around, you were talking about the great PR opportunity. And I just wanted to frame that was actually something that our client has a little bit of concern that there's risk attached, is willing to enter into the project. But I just wanted to make sure that we were framing that and making our clients' concerns known. Again, different if our clients are very confident in their security measures, and if they were walking in and saying, yes, you are implementing these measures, but especially now that we're looking to kind of meet minimum standards, still feel very confident in those abilities, but that it's not something that the client is actually looking at as a brand opportunity currently.
So I think it's probably beneficial to move on from the discussion of risk to kind of some more of the features of the contract itself.
I think talking about the specific, or let's call these specific hardware features of the product, maybe if we can come to terms on that, that might alleviate some of the risk that your client feels that they're taking.
Yeah, I think let's just get back to the security and the specifics of where we think we can help and where you've experienced some more concerns. I think we've made great progress on security guards, but there's other components in the quote specifically.
Okay, so how would you like to begin that discussion?
So just where we're closing off on security guards, I know you're talking about your current contract. So is that something that your client would then be interested in? No, absolutely.
No, absolutely.
So as you addressed, we are currently in a contract with another third-party agency for security. Now, you mentioned you'd be able to do the same cost that we're currently paying of $275,000 per year. So our client would be open to exploring that idea. As you mentioned, this would come with no training costs, and you would be open to starting as soon as possible. Given that we have to phase out of our old contract, would your client be able to offer the first 2 months at no cost as we're phasing into our new fiscal year and signing this potentially multi-year contract with your company?
So usually, you'd be the expert here, usually it runs about $350 a year.
Yeah, so I think from a savings perspective, moving to our client right away guarantees you savings right away. We're providing a service actually cheaper. To just provide what a current provider is providing you with, we would only be charging $175,000 per year. When we add in the additional training program per year that we've quoted at $100,000 per year, that's how we get to that $275,000 per year. So for us, it's really about ensuring that you guys can save money and work within the fiscal boundaries. So I don't fully understand, do you have to buy out a contract? Is that what's currently in place? Because to be honest, if you have contracting issues and you have to wait until the next fiscal year, our client is okay with that. We just feel it would be in your best interest to probably change out the security force as soon as possible.
Well, if it's okay with you, would we be able to just, since we've mostly come to an agreement on this, just table that for now
Great.
and see where we come up to? Of course, we have high budget constraints. See where we're at after we talk about the hardware.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. So you mentioned hardware. Is there anything that you want to talk about in particular or start with?
Well, how about we just start by sort of rehashing what your client had initially suggested as your security standards?
Absolutely. So from a hardware perspective, there's really two main areas where we think enhancements are needed. The first is in some sensoring technology as guests enter, so metal detectors, things of that nature. And we had initially quoted that $150,000. And the second component, which we think is really especially critical, is the camera technology. Currently, you only have 20 cameras in your facility that are quite outdated. We would respond by suggesting that you install 30 cameras, top of the line software, training, full installation, which is what we quoted at a $600,000. So within those, happy to have a discussion around either if you have some questions about our initial quote.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that summary. Our client would just like some information on, you had mentioned that these are sort of the highest end products that your client can provide. is there any way that you can assure that our client will still get top-notch security without using this top-notch, brand-new technology?
And just further to that, as we've discussed, the security guards were the central area that our security was lacking. So we're just reflecting on what Tansy said. Can we still attain the top level of security with the security guards, but maybe not spending outside of our budgetary constraints on the very top cameras and...
Yeah, and so I think one of the things, security guards are definitely with the most immediacy because they're your on-the-ground support.
Absolutely.
And so that one I think would come to a good place there. The cameras are critical, and the reason we talk about this being kind of the top line of security is because that is the kind of protection we want to provide. One of the things we hate to do is have our client suggest a Band-Aid solution, which is actually then it's gonna be an 80% solution, there's still some risk, and then it's gonna have to be upgraded a year or two down the line anyways. The last thing we want is this to be a sunk investment up front, and in hindsight say, if only we could have done this. That being said, we're definitely hearing your concerns around the budgetary realities. One of the things we maybe should have asked a little bit earlier, are there any, I know there's constraints this year, what kind of flexibility is there in next year's budget?
So as far as our client has expressed to us, as Tansy mentioned, we have $500,000 to work with in this fiscal year. Unfortunately, from what our client has expressed is that the budget is under even more constraint next year, and the raises that we've discussed that we were planning on providing to our staff members as well are taking effect next year. So we are unfortunately operating on quite a bit tighter budget for the next fiscal year.
Okay. So this year there's $500,000 in the budget for upgrades. Next year there's less.
Yes.
So combined, we do have more than $500,000 available. We just need to make sure that it works from a timing perspective, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yes.
Okay.
We're willing to get creative on some of the payments with this, and the reason that I say that is our client wants to make this work, but the cameras are something that our client definitely feels strongly about, really to get up to that minimum level of security.
Right.
What kind of flexibility might work in terms of payment? So if we're under, maybe I want to throw this on the board. So for now, and we'll put some tentative numbers, and then we can move some things around.
Yeah, that would be great.
So I'll just call this year one, which is this year, and then into year two, which will ideally be next fiscal, and where we can put different payments in the numbers, so that we definitely respect this constraint of $500,000 in this year, but really opening up possibilities and how we can really come to some agreement.
Sure.
So if we put at the bottom there 275, which is the security guards. And again, we can definitely make some movements. I think it'll help us all to put some numbers in front of us. And then we've got to put 600,000 for the cameras. So do you think our client might be open to we split the payment? Would your client be able to work if we split the camera payment halfway through this fiscal year, half this fiscal year and half the next?
Just to clarify, when we're talking about the cost of the cameras, is that number flexible at all, or are we absolutely $600,000?
On that particular item, I think where we're more likely to be able to be creative is going to be on the payment structure. Again, appreciating that there's a lot of upfront pressure right now, and that's where we really said one of the things with camera technology is with it constantly getting outdated is that if we don't put in the leading standard today, it's going to shrink the timeline drastically for when you need to do your new upgrade.
Ultimately, hardware is an investment in, it's something different than security guards, which is a recurring cost. It's an investment, so you want to make sure that your investment gets a good return. And what we find is when we cheap out on cameras specifically, that return just doesn't work the same way for our clients. So that's why we kind of stick to that as a minimum standard, as providing high quality equipment so that you get the most out of the hardware that you're investing in.
So there could be flexibility on this number potentially?
On the payment structure.
Only on the payment structure, not on the number?
Yeah, because we actually need to purchase these cameras. This isn't a service that we're providing that we could then look to maybe get creative with.
The hardware really is a flow-through cost.
That is the number, and that's what we're looking
I
at.
just want to clarify, like, we have agreed that the cameras are probably a higher priority than the metal detectors are at this time. Just moving forward in the camera discussion, is there any flexibility on the metal detectors, or is that as well a set in stone fee?
So one of the things that our client did talk about, and I know I mentioned hard line items early on, is that with home security on the ground, who are kind of well accustomed to using this type of camera technology with the upgraded standards, it would alleviate some of the need for some of the, potentially we'd have some flexibility with some of the other measures.
For the
metal
time, for the
detectors.
time being, definitely. So if we think about maybe not year one for sure in terms of an upfront investment in metal detectors, because we understand that presents some cost as well, but moving that purchase into next year.
The metal detectors?
Yeah, exactly. So then I think if we're back at the board here quickly, so what we'd be proposing is we would split the cameras 300K across 300K, and then we potentially move the metal detectors into year two.
Okay.
And please stop me at any time if I'm confusing you.
No,
I think that
that's
this is
good.
probably an easy way to
Okay.
look at things.
So currently then, okay, so 300,000 each year for the cameras, and you're suggesting the metal detectors getting installed presently and paying for that?
No, so that having the combination of the security guards and this new camera technology, our client did say that that's one of the measures that could then be postponed, would be the metal detectors. Our client does still recommend that that be an upgrade, that be revisited by Saskatoon Arena.
Okay.
But it doesn't need to be something that's accounted for as early on, particularly with what sounds like mounting budgeting pressure.
Yeah, to be clear, we're not planning on charging you for the metal detectors. We want to, when we come to that point, which is probably going to be in the next year that you want to install them, then we can rediscuss them.
So the hard line minimum for security that you were initially discussing, that does not include the metal detectors at this point. That's something that your client is hopeful that we can all readdress in the future.
The metal detectors on the condition that you've got the cameras in place.
Okay.
How does that sound?
Caitlin and I would just like to take a few minutes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank
I
you very
can-
much.
you.
Okay, so we have taken into consideration everything that you have expressed. And now, again, going back to the fact that there are multiple parties,
Absolutely.
we
Right.
need to, multiple parties at play here, sorry. We would like to suggest, especially since we are considering jumping into this ongoing contract with the security guards, and we expect that this relationship will be hugely successful, a 3-year payment plan. So under that, what we were hoping for was that the cameras can be installed right away. As we've mentioned, this is a large concern for both of us. So as this is the most expensive item on the list, we're hoping that we could just implement the 3-year payment structure for this item only. So that's $200,000 a year over the next 3 years. We would also then, if we can alleviate some budgetary concerns by stretching that payment plan, install and pay in whole for the metal detectors this year. And that is just, all of this is just on the condition that we can reach an agreement on the ongoing consulting
Yeah, no, absolutely.
as well. Can you write down the 275? Thank you.
And so one of the, yes, thank you, I get lost in the numbers
Yeah.
quickly. So I think one of the things, I think our client definitely is open to, and we spoke to them as well, definitely open to payment arrangements.
Okay.
That being said, knowing that our client's position is that the cameras are of greater importance than metal detectors, we could potentially do, if we move the metal detectors
Off or to a future year?
to a future year, sorry, I'm just looking at this, to year 3, and then have your camera payment be completed by year 2.
So what would you suggest then? Metal detectors year 3, and what would your suggested allocation be for cameras?
Yeah, so metal detectors for year 3. And that will then put some more upfront, alleviate some of the pressure here.
So 3 and
So
3.
yeah,
for the
so
camera.
I know you could make this 3 and 3. What we could potentially do, again, I know that you came back in at higher than your 5, which we appreciate, but I know that you've got kind of a lot of pressure within this year. To get the camera payment done there, potentially just moving 75 of this payment over here, so you still come in within your 500 here, because I heard earlier that that sounded like it was a pretty strict budget.
The only issue with that is the security guards would be an annual fee, correct?
Right, so this would be an annual fee, but it sounds like that was an ongoing fee that was already part of the budget.
Well, I just mean the security guards, they're gonna be $275 every year. Like, we can't split that up between years, right? We're gonna have to pay $275 to home security for the security guards every year.
Right, but this would be in place of the $275 that's currently being paid to the existing contractor.
Yes, that's correct.
So would that would be, it sounded like there was $500,000 for one-time improvements, and then this would just be replacing a payment that you already have in place, but it sounded like you weren't able to get out of your contract right away, and feel free to, I'm not sure what your contract arrangement was, this was more that rather than having an upfront payment there.
So the first year what we're paying the security guard is gonna be the prorated amount regardless, I guess. So I guess the 275 for the first year is kind of
Part of
confusing.
Yeah,
the
it's
ongoing
an
cost.
ongoing
Right.
cost for sure.
So we're not going to be paying your client $275,000 in that first year. We would be paying you the prorated
Right.
That's
amount.
right.
Which would be, I think,
Right.
which would be 45,000 for the remainder of the year, and then
Right.
275 would occur
Right.
in year 2 as a full cost.
Okay, so let me just get this straight. So should year 1 actually accurately represented, say, $45,000? And
Yeah,
year 2,
That's
you
correct.
could say
Yeah, and then-
I
Yeah.
did that, yeah.
Right.
Using all these numbers.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we were kind of expressing the full amount of it.
45, and then this is 275 each year.
Ongoing.
Ongoing, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And that would be subtracting out 275 from the existing budget, so we're actually hopefully netting out somewhat equal out of 2 million.
Okay.
Which in that case,
Yeah.
would you be willing to move the metal detectors into year 1?
So we do still have to talk about the consulting. correct? So we still have to work within that budget there.
So we had hoped that if we did end up coming to an agreement on the security guards, which I feel we're making great headway for, that ongoing consulting might be a part of that as well as the training. Instead of, well, just because the $150,000 that you proposed to us originally for ongoing consulting, that was when we had a separate third party supplying our security guards. So what would be the difference in that difference in the proposal number, given that in this hypothetical situation now Holmes has their own security team in place?
So I think that's completely fair. So given that now we're staying kind of within the numbers, if we're able to put the metal detectors into year one then, because you're still staying below your 500, and if we're comfortable with that, given especially now that we're kind of making headway on the key security issues, I think our client definitely could have flexibility, not needing a hardline review.
Okay.
That being said, because they are making a commitment with the Holmes name on this Saskatchewan arena, would look to implement some sort of review schedule, but we would not need to have a hardline agreement with a payment structure.
So is this something then, as you're saying, we don't need a hard line with a payment structure, this is just something that we could talk about on an ongoing basis?
Absolutely. Quite candidly,
Okay.
I think if we implement the cameras, metal detectors, and our security force, you'll need it less.
Okay.
We have to prove metal.
Yeah.
issues if we can-
Sorry.
We're just
Just
Sorry.
Absolutely.
collecting all
just trying
these
to get our
numbers
thoughts
and-
around,
yeah.
yeah. So our only concern is with year two, $300,000 for the security cameras. I'd mentioned that our clients are under tighter budgetary constraints that year. They don't have $500,000 to put into,
Right. So,
What is a more realistic number?
like, I'm just wondering if we can still move some of the costs for the security cameras over to year three.
So if perhaps this would maybe expedite the process a little bit here, and just be a little bit frank with you. Our client was allotted $250,000 for the second year.
okay.
In addition, this is a budgetary increase. However, as we've expressed, our client has already designated some of that money. He has staff that he's had for 3.5 years, and they haven't gotten a raise for 3.5 years. So we can't allot the full $250,000, which we're already over of the 300, to the security upgrades.
So why don't we, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please. Yeah.
So why don't we, and I'm just cognizant that we're coming up on time, and I know everyone's got meetings to get to. It sounds like we've tentatively reached a deal for Home Security to take over the security contract, the $275 prorated for the year. The cameras, it sounds like there is interest in implementing the system. And in terms of payment, then we can take it back to our client to moving a portion of that payment into year three. I appreciate your candidness about the budget. Transparently, we don't want to commit today, just because there are expenses that they then need to sink into purchasing these cameras. That being said, I definitely think with some of the headway we've made today, we can put some options on the table. And then if we cannot do that, we can then potentially revisit moving the metal detectors out. Given that with the cameras and the security guards, our client does feel like they'll be at a much higher standard, and that could be a way to alleviate. So we can take that away with our
Definitely.
client. In terms of what might be kind of the most palatable. Does that address kind of the key concerns?
I believe so, and I think that would end this on a very positive note.
Absolutely.
Just before we do have a couple of minutes, I just want to clarify that with the ongoing consulting, you want to, what would the cost be for the ongoing consulting? We're looking at $300 for the camera the first year, metal detectors $150, and the ongoing consulting.
Sorry, sorry. Go on.
So what we'll do is we'll take that away with our client as
Yeah,
well. Like I
okay.
said, our client, to to be honest, was much less concerned on that point,
Yeah.
given that now so many of the measures will be under the home standard to begin with. And so appreciating where kind of your budget constraints are, we can look back. We just want to make sure it's clear that homes will continue to
Absolutely.
have a role.
So the ongoing consulting is not being factored in the budget presently. It's just something that we'll discuss time to time as we feel it comes up. Correct? Okay.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Great.
Great, yeah.
I think we made
Are there
great
any other
progress
questions
there.
that you have, or?
That's everything our client wanted to cover today.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Pardon me? Thank you so much. 10 minutes?
You guys will be back at 20?
like to start by just introducing ourselves for you judges and for the rest of the room. My name is Adam Borberg, and this is my co-counsel, Karen Mann. We're representing home security, and today we're really looking to come to an agreement, but setting the groundwork for a long-term agreement. With that agreement, some of our key interests were obviously maintaining our brand as a high-value security contracting service. We wanted to provide strong and valuable security to the Saskatoon arena, and we were looking to build that long-term success. Some of the interests that we expected to overlap with the Saskatoon arena was quelling some PR concerns, which we felt we could do this by attaching our name to the project and naturally improving their security. We did expect some conflicting interests naturally around the cost perspective, and we were prepared to have that discussion all the way throughout. So from an overall approach, since security was very important in maintaining brand to our client, we felt that we really had to take almost a hard line stance on making sure that minimum security measures were met. That said, we did want to come to an overall solution. We really wanted to find some solutions, but really center it around security. So we were using keywords, security. We were always trying to tie different factors into each other to show how we could improve security overall. And really, one of the other things is we felt that we had a lot of things in our facts that could help our initial quote become more attractive to the opposing side. So we really wanted to get a lot of that information and come to a solution to try to find how we could move forward. Specifically, one of the key opportunities that we felt that the other side could benefit from Saskatoon Arena was in the security guards. So at the start, we wanted to have a very open discussion around what they currently do with their security guards. We think $275,000 per year for providing and training security guards is quite frankly a very good deal and likely better than what they were currently paying. So we wanted to understand what they were currently doing for security guards overall, because we felt that this could open up some more room in their budget so that we could provide some further security measures to them. The second important thing that we felt was very important to our client's brand, but also to the other side's security overall, was the use of cameras and maintaining a high quality camera for them to use. So we constantly wanted to highlight the value of those two things overall. And with that, we were more flexible on items such as the metal detector and the ongoing consulting fee. Once we felt that we got to those minimum security levels of security guards, and specifically our security guards and the cameras, we felt that we would be able to really help them with the budgetary concerns with some of those other measures. I think overall our strategy worked for us, but we did obviously come into some challenges, which Karen's going to take through.
Some of the challenges that we faced, the first was our strategy, as Adam talked about, was to take a hard line that we had to have the best-in-class security and we weren't willing to attach ourselves otherwise. One of the things that reason that became a challenge is the other team was very upfront about the PR issues, and I think that threw us a bit. We expected to come a little hard court press. And so we adjusted by trying to show some flexibility at the end to kind of then alleviate some of the more dominant position that we've taken in the behalf by taking a little bit more of a hard line. We did also get ourselves into some rabbit holes by not coordinating our messaging with each other. The example I'll point to is when we were talking about the risks, the PR risks to our brand as opposed to framing it as an opportunity. And Adam and I both thought there was a little bit more opportunity to have tossed it back and forth between ourselves, but where we didn't, and we adjusted then by using notes to each other so that Adam could actually then pull us out of there once we started to spiral a little bit. One of the other challenges is we were thrown a bit by the no flexibility on the budget from the general facts, which I think we had coming in assumed that there would be some back pocket flexibility. And the way we adjusted to that was then by looking for alternatives in the year 2 camp, which we did have instructions on negotiating towards. So if we were to do it again, we would talk about their concerns more up front. We came in with the strong security position, but again, to do it, we would take a started out with a trust message, pointing to the previous conversation we had, or negative conversations between the clients. We had a trust message to say you need to trust our company to do what it is they're the experts in doing. So wanting to assert our position firmly that home security group really was, it was a meaningful value add to the Saskatoon arena, which we did by continuing to reiterate some of those same messages throughout thematically the home security group standards. Now it's continuing to the home security group, the security guards, the cameras, and so we kind of maintained that throughout. And the last piece, which will be a half strength, half challenge, is we asked about probing questions around what have they done since the YouTube video, what are some of the concerns, what are some of the concerns, what is some of the other budget being spent on. That was, we felt we did strongly. One of the challenges is given that there wasn't a lot of information, it seemed, in the other party's backs towards it. I think we were expecting to be able to build more to play with there, so it didn't maybe adjust as quickly as we needed to. Overall, we feel like we did come to a good agreement for our client, specifically on the parameters that were most meaningful set out in our facts.
So just to close, some of the things that we would be taking back to our client is we would let them know that we had secured them installing their own security force into the Saskatoon arena, which was not something that they had originally included in their quote, so it's something that we should make them aware of. And then we had some follow-ups to take with them, considering how open they were to year 3 financing and things of that nature. Overall, we were satisfied with what we presented, and we think our client will be happy with the outcome of this agreement today. Thank you.
So again, my name is Caitlin. This is my partner Tansy. So you've asked us to address 2 questions today in our self-analysis, and they are the following. The first being, in reflecting on the entire negotiation, if you faced a similar situation tomorrow, what would you do the same and what would you do differently? And secondly, how well did your strategy work in relation to the outcome? So if it's okay, Tansy and I would like to begin by setting out the main points of our strategy and their effectiveness so that we can refer to them when we're talking about what we would do the same and what would we do differently in the future. So I'm going to get started on that. So the first overarching point of our strategy was to ground this. We wanted to clearly express that there were 3 main parties involved that we needed to satisfy. That being homes, of course the public, and as well as the executive, which was our client and the Saskatoon arena. Our client was really under the gun with this, and if the proposal did not meet the needs of all 3 of these parties, it wouldn't be viable for our client. So we felt that starting off this way was very effective because it grounded every justification. At the end of the day, we had to come back to this and it had to satisfy all 3 of these parties. We needed it to be good for the public, our client, and we also really wanted a positive outcome for homes, hoping to develop this long-term relationship with them.
Okay, so the second point of our strategy was to just emphasize that our client was really between a rock and a hard place. So the rock being that there's this public relations nightmare, there's these security risks that our client has to deal with now, but the hard places being that our client has no money and he has very tight budgetary constraints. So we needed to emphasize this with the other side. Our client he was operating under this constrained budget. He has the executive to deal with, going back to this triangle, he's the executive to deal with, he has the public to deal with, and he has to appease Holmes. But ultimately we wanted to come to an agreement with Holmes. So by emphasizing that we were so constrained, we thought that we might be able to come to a better understanding on their behalf and come to an agreement. And I think that they understood our position was clear, and they kept emphasizing that we are under tight budgetary constraints. So I think overall, all it worked well.
As well, speaking to the next part of our strategy, Tansy and I realized that the $275,000 per year services contract was ultimately going to be very important to the other party. Going over multiple years, that has the potential to be the most lucrative part of this, not just the one-time hardware installation. So it was our strategy to start talking about the $100,000 in increased training, even though that wasn't our client's top priority, hoping that this would maybe allure the other side into saying that they wanted to provide these services to us. So that was our strategy, because we felt that if they brought that to the table, that this is what they wanted, it could be a huge leverage point for our client in terms of budgeting for the hardware, and as well as stretching it out over a multi-year contract. So our idea in framing it as a multi-year contract was to try to eliminate the payments for the ongoing evaluations and the increased training. And we feel that this was extremely effective in the end, because ultimately those were two numbers that were originally proposed that our client no longer needed to budget for, and ultimately our client ended up coming in under budget.
And then the final point of our strategy is just two things that we didn't want to share about our client. So the first being that we wanted to wait and share that our client had an extra budget of $250,000 the next year. That's quite a lot of money, and our client did have commitments that he wanted to explore. He didn't say that he absolutely needed to pay his staff more money, but he wanted to. So we didn't want to come out and say right off the get-go, our client has $250 to work with. And I think that ended up working well. We did end up disclosing that at the end just to sort of get the process going, and I think we disclosed it at a good time. And Caitlin will speak to that and things in our second part of our strategy. The other point that we didn't want to share was that the staffing budget wasn't included in the $500,000 right off the hop. This ultimately enabled us to come to a better agreement in terms of the number in the end. So. This second question that you've asked us to address is some things that we would do differently, and then some things that we would do the same. So I will start by addressing 3 things that we would do differently, and then Caitlin will talk about the things that we would do the same. So the very first point that we'd just like to address right off the hop is there's a little bit of miscommunication on the end on my behalf. They had summarized sort of the end result, and that the ongoing evaluation would be part of the budget. I for some reason wasn't clear on that, and I needed to clarify that. It felt like we were sort of beating a dead horse right at the end. I don't think it affected the ultimate result of the negotiation, but just something that I would try and be more attentive to in the future. The second thing is that there was this sort of, I don't want to call it a power play, because that's where we weren't working against them in any way, but this risk versus concession. They wanted to emphasize that working with us was a risk for them, whereas we were trying to portray it as this lucrative opportunity. So in the coming years, they're now going to have this $275,000 contract that's so lucrative to them, yet they were trying to spin it as this huge risk. And we did press them on that. Can you please emphasize why this is a risk? And I think for a while we were able to just keep that on even playing field. Then right at the end, they did say again that this is a risk, and we sort of let that slide. And I think it would have been a good thing for us to just recharacterize this as a positive thing and not a risk necessarily. And then the final thing we didn't really get at their bad now. So we didn't really understand why they needed the contract with us, and I think we should have asked a few more questions about why they needed. I think this speaks to the whole risk versus concession thing. So had we been able to ask them why they needed, or had we asked them why they needed us, perhaps they wouldn't have continuously characterized this as a risk for them rather than an opportunity. And so those are the three things that we think we would do differently.
So now I'm going to speak to some of the things that we would do the same. So for one, we were trying to avoid bottlenecks in the negotiation, and something that we did well and would do the same. We're asking questions, right, to get at the question of whether or not their hardware lines, the cost for those were flexible at all. So one of the things, we thought that was one way we could be able to reduce our budget. Of course, we ended up coming to a payment plan, but we found out right away that they couldn't actually lower the dollar values. So we do the same in asking a lot of questions about that, just so that we could move on in the negotiation. As well as Tansy had spoken to, disclosing the fact that the $250,000 budget was a hard line for a client in the second year, as well as that he hoped to give some raises to his other employees out of that. When we were getting stuck in the numbers, we feel was effective, just because it helped us push forward and expedite the process a little bit when we were just open and honest about where our numbers actually sat. Then the other party could work within those constraints with us. As well, after our caucus, something we would do the same was coming back and writing our payment plan on the board. The other party had written their 2-year payment plan on the board, which is of course fine, but Tansy and I wanted to make sort of even the playing field a little bit, show that we're both in charge of the numbers. So just take a little control back in the sense that we wanted to express our 3-year payment plan in the same way that they had expressed their 2-year payment plan. And lastly, speaking to our caucus, we had discussed ahead of time of planning to take our caucus as soon as all the numbers started coming out and we knew exactly where the other team was sitting. We would do this the same next time as well. We feel that it was a good time because we got to go outside of the room with all the numbers on the table and come to a clear and concise plan about where we wanted to move forward. It just gave us a good amount of time to collect our thoughts and put forward what we feel was a clear proposal. Thank you.
Our first room of the table is like the edge of the table is up to the floor. And we weren't attending it. The other team was awesome. So they came to see us before. They're like explaining. So we're just gonna be honest. We're not gonna use these boards. We don't know what because some of these like
Yeah.
it's gonna be really weird and some of these we're like, no, we're not touching the board either. Like shimmy off the table.
Okay, so I'm going to, before I turn it over here to the panel to begin the feedback, I'm going to introduce the panel and just tell you a little bit about where they hearken from, and that might be of interest to you while you're listening to the feedback. So I'll just start with this side of the panel and then we'll move across. So with us on this side of the panel is Bob Affleck. Bob has been in practice with the McKercher since he graduated from this college in 2011. Is that right, Bob? Yes? Okay. He specializes in civil and commercial litigation and has particular expertise in the area of protecting commercial reputations and branding. And also on the emerging impact of social media and all of those concerns that clients have in a world of social media, which I think is really interesting about your practice, Bob. You just make it up. We all are these days. So along with Bob on the panel is Sheila Whelan. Sheila was a longtime private practitioner with practice in Saskatoon, a longtime leader in the profession, held many different leadership roles as a lawyer, and then was appointed to the Provincial Court of Saskatchewan, where she served on the court in Saskatoon, and had a particular impact, I would say, on the evolution of youth court processes. Special concerns and talents, I would say, on helping the court sort out how to deal with the challenges of FASD and mental health issues, and then had a role in the development of our new mental health court initiative here in Saskatoon, and also served as administrative judge in her time on the provincial court and is recently retired. So thank you for joining us here, Sheila. And then finishing up the panel is Colin Claxon. Colin graduated from this college in 1983. He's the managing director of a law firm here in town that's just colloquially known as WMCZ. Wallace, Mashishnik, Claxon, and Zawada. He is a leading advocate with experience in just every forum, I would have to say, and a real expertise in insurance law, and so represents local, provincial, national insurance clients of all kinds, and has been considered for a long time, probably 20 years, a leader in the dispute resolution area in Saskatchewan, and was recently appointed a QC. So, so this is our panel. So what I'm going to do is turn the mic over to you. We have to use the mic because of the recordings here, and it'll also help everyone here. So I'll just turn it over to, who's starting? Is it you, Bob? Okay, so over to you.
I would like to say this is somehow deference to my genius or brilliance, but I lost paper, rock, scissors against Colin. So I'm going to lead off and try and stay within my time frames for both the teams. Just generally overall, I think one comment that applies to both, you both did a good job of just getting the bad blood out of the way right away. It's you're not your clients, you're the lawyers representing them. You don't need to bring that in the room. You did a good job just setting that aside right at the start. So team I, this is you guys. I liked how you guys kind of led off and how you worked together. I kind of appreciated the theatrics of, while you were talking, Caitlin, Tansy going to the board and doing the write-up. One comment I'll make on that, it can be a bit risky because you can distract by writing on the board from what your partner is talking about across the table. I don't think it was a major problem here, but it did set up a really nice visual to keep your priorities, and as you've explained, it set well with what your strategy was. The multi-year strategy was a good one going in, that both from the financing side. Also, I think it was it was the strategy I would be thinking of in the same situation you are, is what's lucrative for the other side. Whether this ongoing contract is probably the big piece, and whether or not they felt the same way, it was a good strategy to employ, and with the information you had. I really did appreciate that how you moved when you were going through the security guards. Both sides identified that as a priority. That was great. You almost got to a place where you're spinning wheels, because one, various strategies to negotiations, break it into smaller pieces and deal with each one separately. This didn't strike me as one where that was going to completely work. You had kind of three major pieces that all needed to dovetail. I think you guys did a good job of saying, okay, I think we've gotten to where we need to on it, and let's table that. Now let's start moving into the other things. Worked really well, especially in a limited time frame negotiation, which is completely artificial to how anything would actually work. But I think at one point you guys were almost self-conscious that you seemed to be pausing and kind of writing a note to each other, and there's a bit of silence in the mediation or the negotiation. I actually found that worked. I don't think that's a problem. You weren't just trying to talk to fill air. You were talking to each other. You'd already used the break, so of course that would have been a time when you might have, if you still had it available. Again, in a real life negotiation, you can always take a second break. But I think it worked well in the room. I didn't, even as time wound down, I didn't see much panic from you guys. I didn't see you rushing to close out, okay, we got to talk about these 4 other things. That's a really good sign. That was well done all through. So beyond that, I think tone, I think respect for the other side, I think how you were trying to engage each other worked really well. So good job. I think I have to do that. Okay. How am I doing on time, Sheila? Wow. I'm used to you being able to ring me off here as a judge. So Team E, same thing. Good to get the bad blood out. I know you felt that you started with this hardline strategy, and then you weren't, I think, expecting the candor from the other side that kind of takes some of the teeth out of that. At the same time, it set a tone and it set a theme for your negotiation. And what it was able to accomplish for you was help you identify what were the key items that you're willing to put your name behind and get you there. And then what are the ones we can talk about in the future? You might have wanted to reinforce the opportunity to develop a relationship with them ongoing. You might have wanted to think about how we want to work together. Those comments were made, but sometimes got lost in the numbers. And there's whether or not it changes much for you, your client's always selling something. They're going to want to be able to make the client feel special anytime. There were a couple times when I felt you almost made it like your client was absolutely scared to even put their name on it. And I think that took it a little further than I would have wanted to go. Your client does seem to want to put their branding on it, but they want to put their branding on it as a hero and a fixer, not as the existing one. And I think there was some room there to say, like, you tied it well with the hard line approach, saying in order to put our name on it. But you don't want to leave the other side in the feeling that they're begging or they're coming to you hat in hand. That's just a good negotiation, even when you're highly adversarial. You're looking for face-saving options. They're in a hard spot. You had an easier walk-away position. If absolutely necessary, you could just walk away from this contract. But your client's going to be happier if you can say, hey, we secured a deal for you. You're making more money than you were yesterday, and here we go. Adam, I would avoid the words cheap out when talking about options. Again, when lawyers are in the room, it's probably not going to be quite as bad, but if they had their client there, that could have actually got someone's back up pretty quick. They're already feeling the pinch that their security is woefully behind. So I would make the comment, Karen, at one point you did interject to really drive home, no, we don't see it as a positive putting our name on this. In fact, it's a big risk. I might have let that come a bit more organically than we did, because it was at a time when you're trying to get information from them rather than actually just trying to reinforce your point. Yeah, there are times, I think, and I'd suggest, there are times that overemphasizing the risk could have potentially backtracked the negotiation, and it was fortunate it didn't go that route. But overall, I actually, again, really good tone, really good. I like the teamwork between you guys. You seem to have well-defined roles. There was actually one moment where you did a really smooth baton pass where one person started talking and kind of it was organically the other picked it up on the second half. That was really well done. I'd love if my colleagues and I could work that smoothly, but that would probably require my ego getting smaller. So I think you guys, both sides did a really good job, and now I'll pass it on to, I guess, Colin's going next.
Well, I'm glad I won the rock, paper, scissors contest because Bob had to go first, and he's covered off a lot of the points that I thought should be covered off. I was really impressed with both teams. Frankly, I wish I'd had this kind of training when I was a younger lawyer. I was particularly intrigued when Team I started off with the triangle, and whether or not you had given any conscious thought to putting homes at the top of the triangle, that is at the apex, to make them appear to be the most important part of that triangle. You worked effectively together. There was a couple of times there when you didn't have a complete grasp of your numbers and needed to talk back and forth, and it caused a bit of a hiccup and a bit of a flow, but nonetheless, or interruption in the flow, but nonetheless you managed to get back on track with it. So good job there. It was a good ploy, well, I wouldn't call it a ploy, a good strategy at the beginning of the session to try to get a better sense for where the other client was coming from. You asked that question at the beginning, so why are we back at the table? What are your interests in coming back to the table? And I thought that was an excellent strategy. Despite my practice being in insurance law, I am kind of a touchy-feely kind of guy, and so understanding that the other person's emotional motivations for coming to the table, I think, is an important part of your strategy. You started to try to establish dominance on the issue of whether or not the arena was doing homes a favor, and I think both in the self-analysis from both teams, we all saw that as a hiccup, and I thought maybe that in your drive to demonstrate that you missed some important points, or at least an opportunity to hear from homes on why they thought it was a risk, how it was a risk for them. I didn't hear that come out. It may be just because I don't hear very well, and I didn't hear that come out. But I thought you missed that opportunity in trying to drive that point home. Yeah, there was a point at which, and maybe it was because I didn't follow it very well, but there was a point at which you were talking about the security guards, and it seemed to me that you were almost at the brink of getting somewhere or making an agreement on that, and then you switch topics to moving on to the hardware. And I guess in my limited understanding, I wasn't sure why you wouldn't just carry forward with that to nail it down, but having heard your self-analysis now, I understand what your strategy was there, and so I guess it's not really a criticism. It was just in the circumstances, I wasn't quite certain of why you were doing it that way. For Team E, I thought that team, or your Team E, right? I thought your team worked very well together. It was really very fluid, and as Bob pointed out, the passing of the baton was without hiccup. I was really quite impressed with your approach. And I thought you also did a good job of controlling the discussion right off the hop. In terms of identifying what your interests were. And I felt, and it's not a reflection on Team I, but I felt that from that point forward, you kind of had the upper hand. And Team I was kind of not, I wouldn't say backpedaling, because that's too strong, but certainly on their heels. So I really thought that was a good strategy. Oh, and for both sides, actually, did a good job making sure that both sides understood what the numbers were and that the corrections needed to be corrected, and they were done in a way that was respectful to both sides. It wasn't well, you got that wrong. It was, we need to make these adjustments and that adjustments, and so I thought both sides handled that very well. Just to close for both of you, as I said, super impressed with the job each of you did on this negotiation, especially in the artificial time frame of 50 minutes. You had an excellent grasp. All of you had an excellent grasp of the issues and what to expect and what was coming up, and I thought that was a really good job from both teams.
Well, I'd like to thank my colleagues for letting me go last, I think. They were quite deferential. My experience is usually that the clients are present. I'm thinking of small claims negotiations because we also do that here in Saskatoon. And I want to say to both teams that if your clients had been present, I think they would have been very happy because you both expressed their interests and you held that throughout. That was really very clear to me. I would have been super comfortable, win or lose, I would have paid your bill. Now I think I'll switch to Team I. And I did have a question about why you used the word hard line really early on in the negotiation process, because sometimes that can invite a hard line and a lack of flexibility. It didn't, but just a short caution there.
I think that was, I don't know if we're on.
Was it
Yeah.
E that said hard line? Okay, you reinforced it. I guess that's what I was picking up on. Either way, I would say to both teams, you want to avoid language like that, at least until later on when you really are getting down to brass tacks, because you want to keep the conversation open. Anyway, my mistake. Both of you used the word. I did appreciate Team I in the way that you held the line on the money. I have to say that I think your facts weren't as easy to work with as what Team E had. And it's not easy to be holding on to the money and letting loose the purse strings or not. But I think you did a really good job of that. One of the phrases I really did like coming from Team I was, let's think outside the box. That shows flexibility, and it was there. I did think that you showed good teamwork, especially when you were talking about money. And I understood this strategy later, not necessarily at the time, about not mentioning the 250. But you carried that off really well together as a team later on. Your body language is really good, open. I'm here to negotiate. I'm here to listen. I was really impressed with that. And I did notice that you might have felt like you were losing control, but you took control at some point during the negotiation process. I think the phrase was, here's an opportunity for both you and me. I thought the break worked really well. You came back after that break strong, like you knew where you were going and you were going to close this deal. So it really impressed me, but I have to say I appreciate that more after I heard your self-analysis. Yeah, you did very well. Over to Team E. And excuse me, I've got to get a bit of water here. It's hard to not repeat what my colleagues have already said. So if I'm running out of material, that's why, because they've covered these areas very well. I did appreciate when you pushed for information. You didn't necessarily get it and you got diverted from it, but that was a very good strategy, and you did it more than once because you needed information in order to come up with a proposal. Your body language was really good. It was keener. Yeah, like this side was way back. But I think it was appropriate to the situation, and it worked. It showed that you were genuine, you wanted their business, you were listening well, and you were responsive. I did appreciate perhaps more than one of my colleagues anyway, your emphasis on the risk and what you had to lose. Because you didn't have as much to work with as the other side did, holding back the money. So you had to hold back something. And I also really was impressed with the way you handled the misunderstanding. I didn't even understand what the misunderstanding was. But your tone was good. You dealt with that very well. At the very end, you made it really clear that you had to keep your options open for your client. And I think you handled that really well. It didn't sound like you'd wasted time, but that you had to be respectful of your client's instructions, and there were some new twists. But I thought that came through very well. And I'm used to seeing people or wanting people to reach a deal quickly right in front of me. So, yes, I have to reiterate, I was so impressed. But I'm always impressed with students because you have, you're keen, you've got energy, you've got really good grasp of your facts, and you're motivated. And you all did really very well. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you to those helpful, insightful comments. I think what I want to do now is just bring this to the information you're waiting for, which is where does this end up now? I want to say a couple of things first about this evening, and then we'll announce the results and wrap things up. So just about this evening. We have, we're looking forward to our final awards dinner tonight. You have the address. We have the restaurant booked off, so that starts at 6:30. Come prepared to relax and enjoy yourselves. A couple of people have asked me, should I stay in my suit or what should I wear? Please be comfortable. This is a time to just relax. You've done all the hard work, all of you. It's time to just unwind and enjoy yourselves. We will be giving awards out, taking photos, and so on. So if you feel like you might want to bring a jacket, go ahead, but be ready to head out and socialize after. So I'll leave it up to you to judge all of that. We have a set menu with some options. We can't provide drinks, but there will be drinks available to the extent that you want to buy them there. So that's about that. Your comment sheets you will have available, not the judging criteria, but the comment sheets available for you to pick up tonight. If you'd rather not have them on hand because you're going to be heading out later, then that's okay. We'll scan them and send them to you in the next week. And we'll also scan and send to you the judging criteria forms. Okay, so that's just housekeeping on all of that. Now, congratulations to both of you teams. You did an amazing job, and we've all enjoyed watching you, so let's start with that. You both deserve to be in this final round. The winning team is Team E, Osgoode.